This is the Post Shift Podcast, a raw look at the hospitality industry.
What is happening, Post Shifters, and welcome to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Sean Sewell. This week, I just finished up, literally it's Monday evening, I'm doing a podcast for tomorrow. I finished up another bartender boot camp here in Victoria today. And so I kind of thought, well, while it's fresh in my head, because I've been doing these for a couple of years now, let's roll this out and I'll tell you how to do your own boot camp in your home city, which I think is a really good. I talked about education, training, industry training, all this sort of stuff. So this is sort of like an actual tangible thing you can do in your city. So I think it's about 5 years old now, maybe, yeah, about 5 years old. Myself, Jason Katashak, and Simon Ogden all got together and we sort of started percolating this idea of bartender boot camp. Slowly but surely, Simon's left the city. Slowly but surely, we've sort of percolated this into a thing, and so now a couple of younger bartenders in town are sort of picking up the sort of concept, and I'm sort of helping them out with building it out and sort of focusing on local spirits for the Mint. Obviously, Veneto will always be the home of the bartender boot camp, and so we can do more bigger brand store stuff there. But in essence, what is bartender boot camp? Now, it does not involve any exercise whatsoever. As you probably I've heard from a couple of my podcasts about exercise. Exercise and taking time for myself and my body is probably not my biggest strong suit. And so, although I try really hard. But really, what I really want, bartender boot camp is about an education platform, super casual, that we do once every month, once every 2 months, depending on who's coming into town and what we can talk about. Alex at the Mint has really spearheaded this this program now for a lot of local spirits. So we might get to the stage where we're doing 1 to 2 a month, depending on who's in town. So how do we set up this? So the main goal of bartender boot camp is to create a place where it's completely and utterly neutral in the way of what are you winning, what are you losing. So it's about training for competitions, and cocktail competitions are a big money play or a big experience play in the industry, have been for about a decade, 2 decades. And they're getting harder and harder. But how do you get experience in cocktail competitions apart from just jumping in and competing? Bartender Bootcamp sort of facilitates that and sort of builds out that in a way that you can facilitate some training. So what we do, what we do is we usually partner up with a brand. Today was Divine Wine and Spirits here on the island, on the Sandwich Peninsula. They do a hour to an hour and a half educational session, which I know that a lot of bartenders in different cities do these educational programs and these sit-down educationals with brands all the time, but we sort of add an extra element to it. So we talk about a specific category. Today was Geneva, and one other whiskey that they do. At Divine, they do about 14 SKUs, so we sort of focused it down. And we focused on their barrel-aged Geneva, which they just released a couple of months ago. But you can focus on anything. Usually what we like to do is we sort of like to pick a category and then pick a brand to associate with, so we educate people on the category itself, and then we lead into a brand-specific session. And so this sort of really lays out some really some good groundwork for knowledge-based education for your bar industry. Gets your bar industry into your place. Sort of everybody's like mates and catching up, and it's a really fun, casual sort of thing to do once a month. So we do the session. A very typical educational session, and then what we do is we take up everybody's names into a hat, and we put everybody's names on pieces of paper into a hat, and then we start drawing. So the first 3 that we pick are competing, and now we'll get to the competition in a second, and then the other 3 we pull out of the hat are judging. And so we have 3 bartenders who are going to compete, 3 bartenders who are going to judge, and then we sort of split off. So the 3 bartenders to compete, they get carte blanche on the bar. So we usually pick one specific spirit from the category we talked about, whether it be, today was obviously, again, the Dutch Courage. So that was the focus spirit that you had to create a cocktail. You get about 15-20 minutes to create it. Black box, carte blanche in the bar that is hosting, to use whatever equipment, goods, spirits, whatever they're going to use. So you get about 15-20 minutes to create a cocktail, story, name, all that sort of stuff. Meanwhile, I take off, or depending on who's with me at that time, go off, and go through these very specific judging sheets that we've created for the Victoria cocktail culture here that we use for every cocktail competition because of consistency, take away the subjectiveness of it all, that sort of stuff. And so what we try and do is create this sort of platform where you're going to judge 3 bartenders on how to, educate 3 bartenders on how to judge, and making those bartenders understanding what the judges are looking for when they're competing. So it's sort of like a mirror education sort of platform. So we walk them through all the judging sheets, line by line, how you would explain it to a judge for the first time, and then we really get into it. And so we built out this program many, many years ago. And so you get 3 bartenders who compete, each get 8 minutes to make 3 cocktails, which is 8 minutes is the roundabout standard time for cocktails. We try and replicate the cocktail competition process as much as possible, but keep it really casual. At the end of it, we just announce who wins. We don't go through why they won or how they won or all that sort of stuff. We keep it really neutral, and someone wins, they get a bottle of product from the day, and away they go. And so this is sort of how we do our bartender bootcamp. Why is this beneficial? Getting bartenders to think on their feet doing a black box competition. They're creating stories, because that's a big thing. Stories, names, everything like that. It just gets them in this sort of comfortable rhythm of creating this sort of story and dynamic and persona for behind the bar when they're competing. This is a very big thing for when it comes to big competitions like World Class, Bacardi Legacy, so on and so forth. And then the bartenders learn how to judge. Now, why is this really important? Because I talk to a lot of bartenders today, and a lot of them have come back from big competitions and stuff like that. Bartenders being subjective is literally the bane of my existence when it comes to cocktail competitions. You can be subjective to a degree, but when I hear about judges saying, "Oh, you should have learned more about me for what I like," or I would have named this cocktail a French name because it's a French liqueur company that's sponsoring it, or I think it should have been served this way at this temperature with this other ingredient. These are all things that judges should not. It's an absolute ridiculous thing, and I don't really give a rat's ass if I offend people on this one. If you're listening to this and you're offended, it means that you're being super subjective at a cocktail competition, and you're not thinking about the person who's competing. You're thinking about yourself and your own ego. So bartenders, get over your fucking self. Just because you're judging a cocktail competition doesn't mean you know everything. I judge plenty of cocktail competitions, and I try and be as subjective as possible, based around the story. And the reason why I think this is a big thing. A couple of years ago, one of the kids I worked with at Olo, back in the day, Eric, he won a cocktail competition here in Victoria for Wild Turkey with a cocktail that had cream in it, which is sort of like the biggest no-no in North American cocktail competitions. You never put a creamy cocktail as your cocktail entry. But his story, his thesis, everything that went behind that cocktail created such an experience and such an amazing platform for what the drink stood for that he won the competition, because it wasn't about I don't like cream, or I don't like dilution, or I think it's too warm, or blah 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 blah. Like, it's not about I think, it's about what are they trying to portray. So that's my little semi-finish rant to this episode. Honestly, if you are very interested in doing bartender boot camps in your city, please reach out to me. I'm happy to give away absolutely everything, including judging sheets, how we sort of do the rundown, anything. Just DM me. I'm an open book, transparent as hell. I'd love to see bartender boot camp blow up in other cities all around the country. It would be an absolute dream. So that's my bartender boot camp. How do you do a bartender boot camp? Thank you very much, guys. 100th episode was last week with the incomparable Jeffrey Morgenthaler. If you haven't listened to it, please go back and listen to it. Thank you very much for the support. I'll see you next week. Have a good week. Bye.
Thanks, Post Shifters. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you're listening, whatever platform you're on, give me a good rating, subscribe, listen along. I'm going to keep going. I really enjoy sitting down with people and learning where they're from, what they did, and how they got to where they were. So if you love it, give me a good 5 stars. If you don't, give me 1 and I'll try harder.